The number one factor in employee engagement is the quality of the leadership in the organization. That's at the very top of the organization, all the way to the frontline leadership, supervisor, team member, team leader roles. And it really is about the culture of the organization, the things that we assume about people. If we assume people are there to work hard, to do great work, to provide quality.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 400,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. Today we have with us Richard Hadden. Richard is a keynote speaker and leadership trainer at Contented Cow Partners. He's a thought leader in the areas of leadership, employee engagement, and connecting people practices to profit performance. He's the co-author of the popular Contented Cow's leadership book series and Rebooting Leadership. Since 1990, Richard has delivered more than 1,000 keynote presentations and training programs to corporations, professional associations, and other organizations in 5 continents. In addition to speaking and training worldwide, he and his business partner and co-author conduct employee engagement surveys for organizations to put their clients on a path to leadership and operational improvement. Welcome to peopleHum, Richard. We are so thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Ash. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. So, Richard, let's rewind a little bit, and it's absolutely fascinating to hear Contented Cow, because that is so phenomenally interesting. So tell us about it and tell us about the work that you do there.
Well, I first have to say that none of our writing has anything to do with cows at all, but the cow title was actually the brainchild of my business partner and co-author, Bill Catlett. And he recalled that Nestle's Carnation Milk, or Carnation Milk before it was acquired by Nestle, used to advertise that their milk was of such high quality because it came from contented cows. And so he said, you know, it seems to me like there might be a correlation there between how people are treated in the workplace and their productivity. And so, I always have to say we are not comparing people to cows in any way. We're simply making the same metaphor that in the same way that contented cows give better milk, and that's been pretty well scientifically proven, that engaged, satisfied employees give better performances at work, and that always finds its way to your customer, and that always finds its way to your bottom line. So we really are making the connection between people practices and profit performance. And we've been doing this now for going on 25 years as we really delved into organizations that have a strategy around employee engagement. It's not just an accident. It's not something they put over on the side. It's a major strategic part of how they run their business. And all of our research has shown that when organizations are intentional and strategic about how they treat their employees, that their financial performance is simply better than those that don't look at it that way. So in our company over the last 25 years, we have spent most of our time speaking on corporate and association stages and doing leadership training, doing some executive coaching, and also part of our business is doing employee engagement surveys. So as you can imagine, in the last year, our business has changed quite a bit, and we have not been on those corporate and association stages, but instead I've been right here in my studio making presentations to organizations virtually until things get back to where we used to be. And I'm not sure that that this model is ever going to go away completely.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of these consultants and a lot of thought leadership organizations have sort of strategized dynamically, and they had to kind of move away from the standard model. But thanks for sharing that, Richard. That was very interesting. It's a very interesting analogy, that you and your co-founder really came up with. So, considering the work that you've done, with under the realm of people practices, we often are not able to understand the connection between people practices and profitability, which is something that you have studied and worked on. So, could you also enlighten our audience on how is it really connected to profit performance, and what do you even mean by that?
Okay. Well, again, about 25 years ago, Bill and I, actually, we never intended to set out to write books or to create this kind of concept. We were looking to see if there had been research to kind of reinforce what I think we all know intuitively. I mean, it just makes sense that if you treat people well, they'll be happier at work. People who are in a better mood at work, who are more satisfied and engaged with what they're doing, will probably perform better. So we figured that seemed intuitive. We wanted to find some empirical evidence of that, and we couldn't. So we set out to do the research ourselves. Since then, many others have also kind of joined along with that, and it's become very clear from a number of independent sources that there is a connection between organizations that are, again, as I said earlier, intentional, deliberate, strategic about employee engagement. And we find that for a variety of reasons, then, that their performance improves. People are more responsible at work. Their productivity is higher. They tend to take more accountability for how they use the company's resources. And they really get a sense of ownership in the company, even if they don't have actual financial ownership, and sometimes they do. And it seems to affect behavior in such a way that the organization simply performs better. If an organization performs better, then generally the finances will show.
Thank you for that, Richard. I think that's quite insightful, especially given the circumstances now. Employee engagement is, so much more prevalent. And if that really drives profit, I think a lot of leaders need to understand that it is sort of the need of the hour.
Yes, and
And
I mean, to actually at the very beginning, there were people who said, well, it is the right thing to do socially, morally, ethically to create a great working environment. And I believe that. I've always believed that. But sometimes CEOs and chief financial officers and those who were really looking at solely at the financial performance were not convinced of that. Once they see that there is a connection between creating a great workplace and how they can profit financially, then there's that incentive, I think, all around.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's the whole scenario of trying to understand how do you actually achieve employee engagement, which might be a term that people probably use it quite loosely. But I think it's important to understand the depths of what really is employee engagement, because
Yeah,
now it's no more, it's not about fancy offices or just sort of
right.
bring, bean bags and having good food, doing pizza parties. It's much more than that, is what we're realizing, right?
I'm really glad to hear you say that, Ash, because sometimes people, when they look at this on the surface, they will say, oh, well, it's a great place to work if you actually have nap rooms and beanbag chairs and you can bring your pets to work and, all of these kind of what I call creature comforts. And those are great. Those are fine. They certainly I don't think they inhibit anyone's engagement. But what we learned is that the number one factor in employee engagement is the quality of the leadership in the organization. That's at the very top of the organization, all the way to the frontline leadership, supervisor, team member, team leader roles. And it really is about the culture of the organization, the things that we assume about people. If we assume people are there to work hard, to do great work, to provide quality, not that they're there to see how much money they can extract from the company or, how little work they can do, we find that when that is part of the culture, that people simply rise to that expectation and their performance is better. But as you said, so often we hear about all the little goodies and free meals and that kind of thing. So it's very interesting as we have shifted to a largely work from home model in so many places. Now you don't even have that to consider. And so we have to say, what is it that is keeping people engaged? I'll also say that, as you said, the phrase employee engagement is one that maybe we've heard for the last 10 or 15 years. And as you said, sometimes people use that term fairly loosely, and they equate it sometimes with an older phrase of employee satisfaction. Well, that's a phrase that we've used and a concept that we're very familiar with. But we know that employee engagement goes much deeper than employee satisfaction. In fact, I think people can be satisfied at work without being particularly engaged. It is when they are engaged that their performance and their behavior really begins to add to the bottom line of the company.
Wow, that's actually, quite eye-opening, Richard, because you just don't really, think about it like that. You sort of, as you said, you equal engagement to, somebody who's also satisfied, which is not really the right way to look at it, and that's quite interesting. And Richard, you also sort of you've understood multi-generations, and you probably have even worked with them. And now we are seeing how they all come together in a workplace where you've got the boomers, you've got millennials, and now Gen Z too. So how do you think, in your experience, has that improved employee engagement? What's sort of the mix there?
Oh, yes, it really has. One of the things that I said, and over the last few years, I've spoken a number of times about leading a multi-generational workforce. And based on the research that we've done, whether it's empirical research and also anecdotal and observation, I really don't believe that you can put members of every generation in a very tightly defined box and say, boomers are like this, and Gen Z is like this, and Gen X is like that, and millennials are like that. There's a great deal of crossover with that. But there clearly are certain environmental things that create motivation for different kinds of people. And so what we've tried to focus on is, because the reality of the workplace, certainly in the United States, is we have 4 and in some cases 5 generations working together. So how do you get people to understand their different life experiences and their different perspectives? And the other thing that we know is that while the context in which we practice leadership has changed drastically and is always evolving, that at the very core, what people want is essentially the same. And that is, they want to know that their work is appreciated. Now, doing that for someone who is 60 years old as opposed to someone who is 20 years old, that you may have to do different things. But both of those people want to know that their work is valuable. They want to see the impact of their work. They want to know that they can have a life outside of work and pursue both a professional and personal goals. But as I said, we simply have to sometimes look at providing these things in different ways based on what people's needs and desires are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really sort of helps us understand, what is it that organizations and multi generations really want? Because that's always the golden question, right? And that's the elephant in the room that nobody addresses. That how do
Yeah.
you really improve, employee engagement, or just how do you interact with all of these different generations? And
Yes.
I think that's what you're saying, and I think that's where, if you do that right, your phrase that contented cows still give better milk will start applying.
Yeah. And I think so much of it, Ash, has to do with simply open communication. And the simplest thing that we can do that we sometimes forget is to simply ask people, what is it that would help you to be more productive, that would help you to be more engaged? And you might get different answers from one generation than from another. But we so often we assume, we just suppose, we read what we've read in a magazine that this generation wants this and this generation wants that, and we make those assumptions and we apply them to our group instead of just going out and asking people and say, listen, tell me, what do you need to be more successful? We want to provide that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that was something that I wanted to ask you, Richard. So, of course, when you talk about employee engagement, everyone just says that, oh, yeah, we do employee engagement surveys and, we're great at that. And that's like a check mark,
Right,
for
exactly.
them. and
Yeah.
and I just feel like there's so much more to that. And one thing that you already said was that yes, we need to ask them instead of just doing something superficially. What are some other things that you'd advise leaders to do, and especially do right now when everybody is sort of virtual?
Well, one of the first things people can do is to create a survey that specifically is focused on the work from home or the hybrid or the remote work experience, if that's what your workforce is doing, rather than asking the same questions on the survey that you ask year after year. And I advocate doing that. There should be a baseline survey where essentially the same things are asked year after year so that you can compare. But we've been in a work from home situation now for 1 year. And if you haven't asked your people some questions that are germane to that, then you're really missing out. So things like, do you have what you need in your work environment to be successful? Are you getting enough communication from your leader? What can we do to help you be more effective? How are you personally? How are you feeling after a year of this? And, what is your home situation with are your children in school, out of school? Are you trying to do all of that? And just recognize that throughout all of this, we have to continue to support the people who are providing the labor and the thought and the thinking in the workplace. And everything has changed in the last year, and hopefully things will be changing back to some degree. But we know that the workplace will never be the same as it was on March the 1st, 2020. And we have to respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, that will really, really help a lot of leaders to understand that, it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable, I think,
Yeah.
so that, there is some kind of transparency, and employees, I think, would appreciate that, right?
Yeah, yeah. But in general, with employee surveys, the thing that we see is the biggest mistake is we ask the questions and then we do nothing with it. And if you ask questions, people assume then that there will be some change as a result of that. So it's critical that if we're going to survey employees in any way, that we quickly share with them what the results were and what our plan is based on what we learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so important because it's not just a, survey in isolation that you send out and just, put it somewhere on a notice board saying, hey, oh, our survey is done, but actually have a plan to execute or have some action items on it so that you complete the, whole cycle.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. I think those were great points, Richard. I'm gonna ask one last question. If you have a quote that you probably stand by, or any sound bites, anything at all that you'd like to share with our audience, that would really be amazing.
Well, for us, our premise of all of our work has always been this, that creating a focused, engaged, and capably led workforce is one of the best things you can do for your bottom line.
Yeah, that's actually quite great. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It was really a thrilling experience to talk to you. I've learned a lot, and hopefully, our audience will too. So, it was really wonderful having you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ash. It was great to be here.
Take care.